Okay, so today we're speaking about the mystery of the Ibbur, the Sod HaIbbur, or Yesod HaIbbur, and if there is such a thing, right? What is it? I mean, we know that Ibbur has two basic meanings in throughout history. There's the Ibbur of the calendar, Yesod HaIbbur, and there are some books called Sfarim called Yesod HaIbbur on fixing the dates of the calendar. And there's also Ibbur, which is Gilgul Neshamot. It's also called Ibbur. Now, to understand what's going on here, we have to recall the revolutionary view of Rav Hasdai Crescas, that his universe is a universe which is infinite. The universe is an infinite vacuum with many, perhaps an infinite number of worlds in the vacuum. So he's explaining that the world is not like Aristotle and the Rambam thought, closed. It's not closed, but it's infinite, and there's infinite space. Space goes on forever. It's infinite, and inside this infinite universe, there are many planets. There are many worlds. So after he has explained this, and after he has disproved Aristotle's view that there can only be one world and that the world is closed, and he presents his own view, which is similar to the...
What do you mean?
Multiplex is he allowed?
According to Aristotle, we have our world, our universe. Yeah. He has a little... he says there can't be anything outside it. You have a universe. So in the Aristotelian universe, which was the universe of everybody, just about everybody until the time of Hasdai Crescas, that in the Aristotelian universe, in the center of everything, there is a globe of Earth. That's our globe of Earth. And now, around that sphere of Earth, there is a sphere of water, which is the ocean. And around the ocean, there is air. And around the air, there's another sphere of fire. So you have 4 different globes. You have a globe of Earth. Around that, you have a globe of fire. Dalet Yesodis. Right. Around that, you have... What?
Like an onion.
It's like an onion. Right. Onion rings, one inside the other. Now, you may wonder what happens in a place like Brooklyn, where we see the water out there, but we don't have the water where we are here. And there's a pasuk that explains why in certain places you don't have the water. The water is receded. What's that pasuk? Yikavu Hamayim. Pasuk Yikavu Hamayim explains that there are certain places where the air touches the earth. In any case, you have...
what authority does Aristotle say that, he's saying, I'm guessing this, I have a nevuah, what's the heritage of this story that the world believed in?
Well, the 4 elements, it looks like there is more or less empirical evidence. You look around and you see that there's...
but I'm talking about the cosmos.
Then the next view he has is after the fire, after the sphere of fire, there are spheres made up of what he called of crystal, or what he called ether. Galgalim. These galgalim, each galgal, after the galgal
what is the basis of this?
And the basis is that's what it looks like.
Looks like.
I mean,
Okay, you finish up.
Okay, maybe we should explain it. Okay, right. So the closest galgal to us is the galgal of the moon. So you have this galgal which is made out of ether, or sometimes they say crystal, some kind of crystalline made up some very, very fine matter, and pasted on this matter is the moon. So the moon is on this galgal, and then after the moon you have another galgal, and on that galgal is pasted Mercury, which is called Kochav Chama, and then you have, after you have Mercury, you have the sun. The sun is on a galgal, and then you have Venus, Noga, which is on a galgal, and then you have Mars, Madim, which is on a galgal, and then you have Tzedek, Jupiter, which was also on a galgal, and Shabtai, which is on a galgal. And then after Shabtai, you have another galgal on which are pasted or fixed all these stars, all the fixed stars. They're called fixed stars. So how do you know they're all on the same galgal? Because when you look at the stars at night, you see they all move together. Whereas the planets, each planet has its own orbit. So that's what they figured. They figured that each planet is on its own galgal, because that explains why Mars goes in its direction and Venus goes in its direction. They figured each one is on its own galgal. And that's for all the other stars. You see, they're all moving together. So what better explanation do you have than to say
Flying stars?
oh, well, that's an extra that they didn't, that they thought was something in the closer to, in the air of fire, in the sphere of fire, that those flying stars are not really stars, they're closer to
Crystals blasting.
something like that. Right. Okay. So that's what they thought at the
Till Crescas.
then Hasdai Crescas comes along, and then they said, well, what's, oh, by the way, so you would say, what about some of these other planets which you may have heard of, like Uranus and Neptune and Pluto? You heard about these?
Sure.
Right. What about them? What are they?
No.
They didn't know about them because
They
why?
didn't see them.
You need two things in order to see those planets. You need a telescope, and you also need Rabbi Goldberg. You need a theory, right, to know where to put the telescope. I mean, you can have a telescope, but if you don't know where to put the telescope, you're not going to see them. Right? So you have to be able to figure out. And the way they figured it out is they saw that there was a pull on there was a variation in the motion of some of the planets. So it looked like there was in contact with some gravitational force that was pulling it, and then they looked there and they found these other planets with a telescope. But in the medieval times, they didn't know about those planets because you can't see them with the naked eye. Okay, now, so against this, so what did they say? They said outside of this sphere of the fixed stars, where you have all these stars pasted on, what's out there? And Aristotle said, nothing. There's nothing out there. There's neither matter nor a vacuum. There's nothing, no space. It's nothing. And if you say, well, how can you understand that? Well, that was a problem. But it's also impossible for the human mind to understand what it means to talk about infinite space. So there are two things that the mind cannot really understand. That the world comes to an end someplace and there's nothing outside. If there's nothing outside, what do you mean? There's nothing on the other side. Well, that's what Aristotle said. There's nothing on, you can't put your hand outside and there's something there. There's nothing there. There's no vacuum and there's no plenum. There's no matter. There's nothing. So that's difficult to understand, but it's also difficult to understand that everything goes on for infinite. So neither of these things, the human mind is unable really to conceive of either of these two possibilities.
As part of God, this is how I explain God.
What?
Aristotle said this is God. The world is God.
I don't know if Aristotle really didn't say that,
No.
but
That's what it.
right, maybe other people said it, but not Aristotle. Well, maybe what he may have said is that the intellect that's moving everything is God. right? The intellect, the intellect.
The
mover, the Miniya Rishon. Right. Okay. So now Rav Ḥasdai Crescas says it doesn't make sense to say there's nothing outside.
But the Ḥasdai was the first to criticize it, or were there any philosophers before Ḥasdai, not Jewish philosophers, that criticized already this Aristotelian?
There were one or two Greeks who threw out the possibility of
Still
the
Greeks
idea.
then?
Yeah, Greeks then. And in terms of the modern period, he's probably the first one.
Even from the first one, even by the
Right, even by the
Gentiles,
Gentiles. Right. There was one philosopher in Paris named Nicole Orem.
They say
Right, Orem, who mentioned the idea, but he said it's impossible. So Ḥasdai Crescas defends the idea. Says, right, okay. So he's saying now that as opposed after and the whole reason he's attacking Aristotle's theory is because the Rambam is using Aristotle's physics to base his proofs of Hashem and the Achdut and that Hashem is not corporeal. Okay, so he gets into this and he says that outside our world there is an infinite vacuum, and there are other worlds inside this, floating around in this infinite vacuum, perhaps an infinite number of worlds. He quotes twice in Or Hashem the statement from the Gemara that Hakadosh Baruch Hu shat b'yud chet elef olamot. So there you have 18,000 worlds, and he says there's hashgacha pratit in 18,000 worlds.
By world, you mean universe or world?
Worlds.
what does it mean?
That's good. He says olamot. And the olamot are inside the universe. He's talking about one infinite universe which has.
So he doesn't imagine multi-universes.
No.
So what differentiates one world from another world within the universe? It's on a different gravitational pull. It has a different source of gravity.
He says it has a different gravitational pull, right?
And
the reason he actually why does he bother to mention this? Because Aristotle, when the Aristotelians say you couldn't have two worlds, because if you had two worlds, then all the elements from the other world would come and fall into our world, right? And he says, no, each world has its own gravitational.
But what did he stress when he said over this thing that there's a few worlds and every world is a shgacha pratit? What did he want to stress with this?
He was just interpreting the midrash. V'kadosh baruch hu shat b'yud chet elef olamot.
Shat means that in mashgiach.
That's how he understands it.
How do you talk of gravitational pull vis-a-vis these people? There is no gravitation.
Which
Aristotle.
yeah, no. But I'm talking that when I said gravitational pull, I was talking about those who discovered Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So we're talking about the early modern period. We're talking about the 16th
No, he said Ḥasdai already said that it's not that there could be two worlds and it's not.
Right.
He's asking that gravity is
Yeah.
later than Ḥasdai.
Okay, so what they meant by gravity then was what they call the theory of natural places. The theory of natural places, right. Theory of natural places is that this pen, for example, is made mostly of the element of earth. And it has a desire to go to its natural place. So if you take an object that's made out of earth and you put it in the air, which is the element of air,
So
and you let it go,
really a part of
it will go back to its natural place.
This is really a part of Aristotelian Dalad Yisoidus. So even though we're choilik with Aristotle, by the second part, how the world, Ḥasdai, but in this part he does go with Aristotle about the Dalad Yisoidus and it pens the mishkal of the Yisoidus.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He says the pen. No, the Aristotle said. He says Rav Ḥasdai Crescas says the pen doesn't fall because it's going to its natural place. The pen falls because it's heavier than the earth.
So he does have some kind of concept.
Right. He does already have some kind of concept, a different kind of view of gravity. Anyway, let's get back to this Soda Ibbur. So after Ḥasdai Crescas has argued that there's an infinite vacuum, and this infinite vacuum permeates everything in the universe. He says as follows, and the first text we have is from Ma'amar Aleph, and that Ma'amar, you can, maybe you could call it a book or a treatise Aleph or whatever, Ma'amar Aleph, Klal Bet, Perek Aleph. And this was from the first printed edition from Ferrara. The first printed edition was from Shin Yud Hey, 1555, which is fairly early for printing a philosophical book. It was printed in Ferrara in 1555. And here's what's written there. V'haya hadimayon hazeh.
Muhammad is an article.
Right. Well,
Yes,
I mean, in
right.
modern language, a Ma'amar is an article.
I'm just saying, there it's not article.
It's or an essay. Ma'amar is, you know,
Essay,
it's
yeah.
could be, but here when it's part of a book,
Right,
it's
right.
V'haya hadimayon hazeh. The idea, Kadosh Baruch Hu mikomo shel olam. Right. He just cited the statement that Kadosh Baruch Hu is mikomo shel olam, and he says this is a very good metaphor to understand what Hashem is, to understand Hashem, to understand the idea of the presence of Hashem in the world. When we say that Hashem is Makomo Shel Olam, what do we mean? And he says, you can understand it very well with my theory of Makom. When you think of the place, the space of the universe, Makomo Shel Olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the space of the universe. He's this infinite, he's like this, like infinite. He says, V'haya hadimayon hazeh, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hamakom, nifla, ki kasher rachakei hapanui, just as the dimensions, the three dimensions of the vacuum, nichnasim berachakei hageshem, that the three dimensions permeate all physical objects in the universe, umalo'o, kain kavodo, just like the vacuum is every place. Every place there's a vacuum. The vacuum goes through the table, it goes through the house, it goes through every place in Brooklyn and the United States and the world. The vacuum is, and the whole universe, the vacuum permeates everything, just as the vacuum.
What do you mean the vacuum?
The space, the empty space which has things in it, permeates everything. It's empty. It goes through everything. It underlines everything. Nifla ki kasher rachakei hapanui nichnasim berachakei hageshem umaloo kain kvodo yitbarach b'chol chelkei ha'olam. That's similarly why kavod Hashem is every place in the world. Just as the vacuum permeates everything.
You mean emptiness more. You mean vacuum or empty?
Vacuum means empty space.
When he says vacuum, he refers to the three dimensions that permeate everything. That has nothing, and they can be filled by objects. But if there are no objects there, it's just a pure emptiness, right? Okay, olam umaloo, kamo shamru, malo kol haaretz kavodo, yirtzeh. Ki im heyoto kadosh, 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 malo kol haaretz kavodo, im heyoto kadosh v'nivdal b'shalosh kedushot, kadosh, 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 sheyirmoz behem el heyoto nivdal mishlosha olamot. It's not clear what those shlosha olamot mean, but probably it refers to the olam of the four yesodot, of the arba yesodos, and because there are three worlds. There's the world.
The arba yesodos, you said.
No, yeah, but it's the arba yesodos is one world, and then there's the galgalim, which is two worlds, and then there's the intellectual substance, which is the third. So the world is divided into three kinds of being. The Rambam discusses also in Hilchos Yesodei Torah. That was the same. Yirtzeki im heyoto kadosh, but the Kadosh Baruch Hu is nivdal, is separate from all these three worlds, from the world of the four elements, from the world of the galgalim, and from the world of the intellects. B'shlosh kedushot, sheyirmoz behem el heyoto nivdal mishlosha olamot. Hine melo kol haaretz shehu. Even so, even though Hashem is transcendent. He is nivdal from the entire universe. Nevertheless, he is also present every place. Kvodo malei olam. Hine malo kol haaretz. Shehu yesod ha'ibur shebiyesodot kvodo.
This is a new term.
What?
This term, Yesod HaIbbur, doesn't talk about the Yesod HaIbbur.
This is the big puzzle, the Yesod HaIbbur. This is the big puzzle. What's it doing here, this Yesod HaIbbur? And we're going to see in a minute what the great Professor Harry Ostrin Wolfson writes. Yesod HaIbbur, and how he interprets it. Now, Harry Ostrin Wolfson, who was a great professor of medieval philosophy, he was born in a town in Russia called Ostrin. He called himself Harry Ostrin Wolfson, and he studied in Slobodka before he, as a young boy, before his family moved to the United States, and then he went to Harvard University, and he studied philosophy, and the first big book he wrote was on Hasdai Crescas, called Crescas' Critic of Aristotle. And here he translates this passage as follows. First he gives the Hebrew as follows, and then this is in number 2 is how he gives the Hebrew text, and number 3 is how he translates it. V'haya hadimayon hazeh, namely hamakom is a kadosh baruch hu, nifla, ki kasher rachakei hapanui nichnasim barachakei hageshem umelo'o, ken kvodo yitbarach b'chol chelkei ha'olam umelo'o, ka'omro kadosh 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 Hashem tzvaot. So he adds in brackets, so just in case we forgot the pasuk, he adds in brackets the words of the pasuk to emphasize that Hashem is separate, kadosh, 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 from the universe. In one of the essays of Yosef Ber Soloveitchik from Yeshiva University, he quotes this pasuk in one of his philosophic essays. He says, transcendent, transcendent, kadosh, 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 transcendent, transcendent, transcendent. Kadosh is like transcendent. It means it's, in philosophical language, it means separate completely from different completely from everything else, which is like in kadosh is parush.
Not like Wilson said, holy, holy, holy.
Right, but that's the pshat. Holy, holy, holy is the pshat. Right. Ki kasher kadosh 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 Hashem tzvaot malo kol haaretz kvodo. Yirtzeh ki im heyoto kadosh v'nivdal b'shalosh kedushot sheyirmoz behem el heyoto nivdal mishlosha olamot hinei malo kol haaretz kvodo v'hu yesod ha'ibur shebiyesodot kvodo. And he translates it as follows. This last metaphor, namely that the place is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is remarkably apt. It's a great metaphor. For as the dimensions of the void permeate through those of the body, and its fullness, so his glory, kavodo, the kavod, blessed be he, is present in all the parts of the world and the fullness thereof, as it is said, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The meaning of which may be stated as follows. Though God is holy and separated by a threefold holiness, alluding thereby to his separation from 3 worlds, still, the whole earth is full of his glory. The whole earth is full of the kavod, which is an allusion to the element of impregnation, Yesod HaIbbur, the element of impregnation, which is one of the elements of glory. Glory is the kavod. And then Wolfson explains this Yesod HaIbbur. Crescas uses the expression Yesod HaIbbur, the element of impregnation, as a designation of the emanative process, right? Ha'atzal, emanation is atzilut, atzilus, ha'atzala, the emanative process, whereby the divine influence, the shefa, the divine influence.
Could you please explain a little bit for the people what is Atzilut? What is the idea of Atzilut?
What is Satmar Hasidim don't know what Atzilus is.
No, you have to.
What?
It's not Chabad.
You're not,
Only Chabad knows what
yeah.
Atzilus
And
is.
first of all, we're talking about Plato's Atzilut.
Right.
So,
Right.
so could you please?
This idea of Atzilut or emanation, the idea of emanation, or sometimes it's like the idea is that there's an overflow from above, from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and this overflow comes down to the world. So if you could imagine a building, let's say with 100 floors on the building, and there's a big flood on the top floor, and well, on the 99th floor, there's also a lot of water. By the time you get down to the first floor, it's pretty much dry, but there's just drops coming down, and the drops are the divine coming down. So the idea is that the further you get away from the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the less the shefa.
Well, even further, the God is everywhere. So if you go like this way of Crescas, God is the world. What does it mean further you get from God?
Well, first we're talking about what the original idea.
Exactly.
But in the way it's determined in the Sfirot, the higher Sfirot have a stronger presence of Hashem than the lower
Could it
Sfirot.
go together with the cosmos of Crescas himself? He's right. He's really like a little bit, that God is the world is God, God is the world.
That's the Basminish.
Well, just first let's understand the idea of the shefa. The idea of the shefa is that it's often related to water, like a spring of water, and there's a force of water coming out. Mayan Tzinorot. It's also the Tzinorot. It comes down in the Tzinorot, and it comes from a very powerful source. But as it gets into the world, further and further, it fades down. Or you can think about it as if you have a canvas of color, a very strong color, that's very strong blue on the top, or very strong black on the top. But by the time it gets down, it's like a soft gray, right? And so this is the idea of Atzilut and emanation, and of course this idea is developed very much in the Kabbalah.
Yeah, but why did Plato develop this idea? For what reason? What did he want to explain?
It's not really so much Plato, but the Neoplatonists, Plotinus,
yeah, right. So why did
they wanted to explain the presence of Hakadosh Baruch Hu in the world, and they believed that everything is emanated. The creation is emanated from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, and so this idea we find in the Sfirot, that the higher Sfirot have more divinity in them than the lower Sfirot, and yeah.
What are they doing when they're creating all these like word salads of describing a description? Are they saying we studied it, we're thinking it, we like the sound of it? Like what in their mind? What are they doing? Like today we talk about like in a scientific way. Could it work? What are they doing? Does it work with the words?
Science via Maya.
No, I understand, but like, okay, whatever, the whole world believed in it, but what would they believe? That this is a truth that was proven, it was given to us Ben Achabem, like what's their story? Matan Torah, like Har Sinai? Where is this truth emanate from?
I'm excited how they understand things of the world.
I know, but like nobody questions it. But today you would say this. Einstein's just a theory, and he worked with labs and.
Look, I think usually when I tell the students in the first class philosophy that the best thing about philosophy is the questions. The most serious thing about philosophy is the questions.
Yeah.
Answers and
Don't take the answers. And the important thing about philosophy is people are trying to know, what does it mean to say that Kvodo Malei Olam? And do we really mean that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is every place? Well, maybe we mean that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is every place, but not in the full force. There's kind of a presence of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, which is not the. And this is I think what people try to explain. You know, there's what they're trying to explain by emanation, that there's a feeling that human beings have an ability to connect with Kadosh Baruch Hu, but not fully. There's something that we don't. Kadosh Baruch Hu is present every place, but in some way he's. Now you can say, what's the proof? I don't know. There's.
They're not proved like what.
It's empirical, the same way that is. You see,
No, your question is not a question.
Yes, some people
Why did they
can
decide? Well, the professor answered is, how did philosophy develop anything? They were thinking, what is the world? So first to Tal said it's water. He said this.
Oh no, so they say we observed it, so
They started observing it, and they started saying, I have to take how it works.
Look,
It's a theory. You know?
Different questions are trying to address the
you can't
question.
say
it's a theory, but the questions are really very serious. If you look at the stars at night, you look at the stars at night, and you see that they're all moving together in the same in the same system, the same way, in the same alignment. So it's a very serious question to ask: how is it possible that they're all moving so perfectly together? And one answer is they're all pasted on the same galgal. Now, no one ever saw a galgal, and no one's ever going to see a galgal. No one ever saw a galgal, but he gave a good explanation. The other explanation is that our Earth is turning around, and that's what's making them look like they're all together. So, but what's important to understand, the question is a very serious question. And now also the other question is, the other feeling is people have a feeling that we have some kind of a connection with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. When the Navi says, Kvodo Malei Olam, Malo Kol Haaretz Kvodo, what does that mean? What does it mean, Malo Kol Haaretz Kvodo? And I think what they want, that's how they start talking about.
What does it mean we have a connection? What does it mean, these words?
You know, this.
The Kadosh Baruch,
I don't know if it got the Satmar,
which
if it got the Satmar, but they say of the Crescas.
The Greeks talking there.
They're talking about, you know, they also had ideas of
consciousness.
Yeah.
It explains simple consciousness. Why do we think? They explain that there's Das Elyoin that people connect to. That this is.
I have this. There's a statement of the Crescas Rebbe. I don't know if we got to Satmar or not. Where they asked the Crescas Rebbe.
I don't know why you think all Satmar.
where they asked the Crescas Rebbe, where is the Kadosh Baruch Hu? And the answer is where people let him in. But so this is a very serious question.
This is the story of Abai Verova. They asked when they were children, "Where's the Kadosh Baruch Hu?" Someone said on the roof. And someone said inside.
Right.
You let him in.
Yeah, you have to let him in.
Professor, I think the Galgalim for the stars on the Galgal, it's not like there's a question and then there's an explanation. I think it's obvious that there is a Galgal. If you don't know the facts of today, you live 1,000 years ago or 5,000
That's what
years
it looks like.
I mean, you look at the sky and it's obvious that there is a Galgal. It's not even a question and an answer.
No, we already asked mine the Galgalim. He's asking why do you know?
Once you know that there is a Galgal, which is obvious,
you know there's a mania.
you need to start building it. You're building on it.
But
There's two Galgalim and four.
The reason you have to say it's a galgal is because the sun is precisely follows the same route all the time. So if it were just going on its own, you would expect it to swerve back and forth like
the world is turning on its axis. Why aren't we falling down? That's what they're always.
That's right. That's a good reason to think that it's not. Right. Exactly. Right. Okay. So anyway, what is Wolfson is saying? We have this tremendous idea here of Yesod HaIbbur, and Wolfson explains it as follows. Crescas uses the expression Yesod HaIbbur, the element of impregnation, as a designation of the emanative process, Atzilut, Hatzalah, whereby the divine influence is extended to the terrestrial world. The Shefa Eloki comes down to our world. That's basically what he's saying. Ordinarily, now he has to explain this term, Yesod HaIbbur, which usually doesn't mean this. Ordinarily, the term Ibbur refers to metempsychosis, which is Gilgul Neshamot, as in the expression Sod HaIbbur in Bachya Ben Asher's commentary on the Bible, right? In Shmot, right? There are two places here, and in Devarim, where in the Kameh of Rabbeinu Bachia, Ben Asher, you have he uses.
As the Rambam
He follows the Rambam. He develops
why
it.
doesn't bring the Rambam? Okay.
I don't think the Rambam uses the
Torah
expression.
Sa'od.
The Torah Sa'od, okay. Okay, but he uses the expression Ibbur.
Yeah.
Okay, but maybe it's clearer in Rabbeinu Bachia. Crescas' interpretation of the verse, therefore, is as follows. Though God is exalted above the three worlds into which the Sfirot are divided, so the Sfirot are also divided into three worlds. The three highest Sfirot, the middle Sfirot, and the lower Sfirot are also called Olamot. Still, through the emanative quality of his glory, i.e., the Sfirot are the emanation of the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He is present in the terrestrial world. And this is the Ibbur, this is the impregnation, right? This is the impregnation, this is the term Yesod in Kabbalah is the name of the ninth Sfirah, which represents the genital organs. And here he quotes Israel in his Perush Be'eser Sfirot, who says, Yesod Olam Bekoach Hagid. It is not impossible to find in the expression Yesod HaIbbur an allusion to this. So in Yesod HaIbbur, we have the impregnation of the universe. The Kadosh Baruch Hu impregnates the Shekhinah, the universe.
With his presence.
With his presence, exactly. And so it's really a very powerful idea. That
So it's not the Shekhinah itself, it's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, it's something that emanates from him that's
But this is
present in
not.
this world.
But this is not what
And that's why
Crescas.
HaKadosh Baruch
This is
Hu-
not what Crescas is coming to say in this ket of Kodesh. He's come to say, not going in Atzilut now. He's just come to say that the Dimyon, that just like he's saying the world is infinite, just like God is infinite, and God fills up the. It's not coming now to say the idea of Atzilut. Where does it come in? Where does Wolfson bring in the whole idea of Atzilut here? Crescas doesn't
So
discuss now the idea of Atzilut.
Rav Yonasan and Reb Yoel are a little skeptical here about what's going on. First, let's understand how Wolfson is understanding Rav Hasdai Crescas. He's saying, just as the three dimensions, right? He's speaking about three dimensions permeate everything. Everything goes to three dimensions, permeate everything. So the kavod of Hashem permeates everything, and this permeation, this idea that Hashem is every place, even though Hashem is transcendent, nivdal, kadosh, nevertheless, the kavod permeates everything.
He's saying there's
And
a contradiction.
it's-
He can't be present and transcendent. So he's saying there's some diluted form of the Shekhinah that does
Exactly.
come down to us.
And that is
And that is Ibbur,
and that is Ibbur.
which is a very I'm sorry to say, which is, I would have used different terms. I don't know why he uses Ibbur for this. I'm sorry
Well,
to say.
it's very, you might have used different terms, but it's also a very powerful term because it's an impregnation. The world is pregnant with the
God.
Kadosh, right.
With
The
the
world is pregnant with the Shekhinah.
But why
So
say
God
God's pregnant? The word is
impregnates
God
the world
himself. I
with
don't
his
understand why you have to
presence.
say that.
It's like the Son of God. He's impregnating the world with his presence.
The word is pregnant. It's filled.
No.
Where's the
Right.
word pregnant? Pregnant recreates like.
No,
Something-
pregnant meaning to say it's not God himself. It's
It's
like Atzilut,
it's a
shadow
son,
of God.
it's a son.
The son of God. But I don't want to say the word son, yeah, but why should we say such a concept at all? I'm asking, isn't this Keta from Crescas not coming to talk now about Atzilut? He's talking from a different thing, no?
Okay, so we have a very famous historian of Jewish philosophy named Yitzchak Julius Gutman, who was a professor in Germany and then moved to Eretz Yisrael. He was a professor at the Hebrew University. In 1933, when he's writing this, he's still in Germany, and he reads Wolfson's book, Crescas, the Streak of Aristotle, and he writes a review of it in a German magazine. And he has a lot of criticisms. And one criticism, he agrees with Rav Yonasan and with Reb Yoel, that there's no Kabbalah going on here at all. He says, this is a philosophic book. Where is this young Wolfson guy from America? Why does he think that there's some Kabbalah here? There's no Kabbalah. He's simply not reading the text. He's not reading it right. Because what does it say here? If we look back, he says, Yirtzeh ki im heyoto kadosh v'nivdal b'shlosh kedushot, sheyirmoz b'hem el heyoto nivdal mishlosha olamot. Even though Hashem is transcendent, Hinei melo kol haaretz kvodo. What is haaretz? It's the pshat. Melo kol haaretz, the element of earth. Melo kol haaretz kvodo. Shehu, and you don't read Yesod ha'ibur. You have to read Yesod ha'ovi, namely the heaviest, the crassest of all the elements. So it's a kal v'chomer. On the one hand, Hashem is nivdal from all three worlds, but He's present even in the most crass and the most heavy and the most darkest, the earth. He's not only present in the fire and the air and the water, but Hashem is present in
how is it?
He's present in everything. It's a kal v'chomer. If He's present in the
how
earth,
is it? If He's transcendent, how could it?
And you have to read Yesod ha'ovi.
Understand, but how is it? If He's transcendent, how could it be present?
Because Hashem is present every place.
We don't understand.
He's present
And that's what
there's two things. There's transcendent and there's immanent. There's another word, immanent. Transcendent and immanent. He's present.
And that Baal
Basically, Crescas, Wolfson understand Kvoidoi, like the monach Kvoidoi, like Atzilut, Kvoid Hashem, like and all like they developed such a thing, Hashem and Kvoid Hashem. This is why he understood that Kvoida means like, this is the reason I'm asking.
But also no, Gutman is not disagreeing with that. Gutman is saying also the kavod is every place. But what does it mean the kavod is every place? It doesn't mean that it's Yesod Ibbur. It's not written, it's not written Ibbur any place, he says.
What do the manuscripts say?
Oh. So now you're asking a very good question.
First, let's see
what are the manuscripts say happen to be on the last page of the thing. You can see. You're interested in what the Rabbi Motti's question is really very good. What do the manuscripts say? And we're going to see this very interesting. I was going to mention it first. We'll see how Wolfson pushes aside Gutman. But what the manuscripts say, the first thing to say about the manuscripts, not one manuscript, if to look at it again, has the yud in the Ibbur. Not one manuscript.
Has the yud.
It has the yud, right? It's in the end. Let's look and see how Wolfson.
There is the other concept which is very similar, which is Sadhu Ibbur, not Yesod, but Sadhu.
Right.
And I see you using it as the title of the lecture, the mystery of Ibbur, right? It's an allusion to this other concept.
Right.
So is this like a militza based on Sadhu Ibbur, or?
That's the question. Wolfson definitely thinks it is. Wolfson sees Yesod HaIbbur. Well, first of all, you do have Yesod HaIbbur with regard to the calendar. It's called Yesod Ibbur. Right. But you also have Soda.
That is Soda.
You have both. You have both Soda Ibbur, and in one or two places you also have Yesod Ibbur, where
calendar?
I think in the Sidur of. I think in the Sidur of Abu Dharam.
I think he intentionally left it funny because it's an Ein Sof concept, so he doesn't want to.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Abu Dharam mentions
I think he
calendar. He calls it Yesod.
I think so, if I remember right, or maybe no, he doesn't. It's possible that maybe also Ibn Ezra. I remember there's some.
Ibn Ezra
uses the expression Yesod Ibbur when they're teaching you. What does it mean? They use it when there is a perek, which I've seen in one or two places. I think it's Abu Dharam, maybe Ibn Ezra, where they're talking about teaching you how to calculate the calendar.
Right.
So they call that perek Yesod HaIbbur, teach you how to work out the Ibbur, which is all mathematics and
astronomy. This is
astronomy.
a contradiction of the Rambam, who thinks that the Lo Yesiga Mesiga gift, like he literally has like an element to it.
This is different from the Rambam, right? But let's just look at what let's just look and see what the Wolfson's.
So the Ibbur,
We'll get to the
so
method.
the Ibbur on the calendar, it's not after the Rishonim, it's the Gemara.
It's a Gemara, right. But in the how you figure out how you feel like this year we have a dar bet. How do you know? How do we figure out when a dar bet is?
Right.
Okay.
One of the Kaddish is Kaddish Lo'ulam Al Ma'amayim, it's Zman.
Right.
So that can be Soy Du Ibbur because it's Zman. It's referring to the Zman.
If it's man, right, it could be.
It's the time. The time is also
Even a Chodesh?
Right. Okay. Anyway, let's just see what Wolfson, how Wolfson responds. It's very interesting.
Not reading
These are-
Julius, not reading Julius.
Yeah, we'll read Julius in German. We'll see how Wolfson makes fun of him. And it's very interesting because these are two really great. Wolfson was older. Gutmann was older than Wolfson.
Right.
And Wolfson at this time is a young professor at Harvard University. And Gutmann is a big, has already written some important books on the Rambam in Germany, and later on he gets a position at the Hebrew University. But here, Wolfson, you can see that Wolfson's very confident. He's not shaken up that the big scholar from Germany is criticizing him. Wolfson writes as follows: in the passage, Hine Melo Kol Haaretz Kvodo Shehu Yesod HaIbbur, and here Wolfson puts in parentheses Ibbur without the Yud, because you can see that somewhere in the back of his mind he has a problem here. He knows that. Gutmann suggests to change Yesod HaIbbur to Yesod HaOvi, right? The element of thickness, Yesod HaOvi, which would be the earth. Now, if a term meaning crass, coarse, or gross would satisfy him in this context, why not change it to Yesod HaIkur, or HaYesod HaAchor, or still better, to Yesod HaAfar? Any of these readings would be better than Yesod HaOvi. And in fact, Wolfson is right about that. All three of those readings would be better than Yesod HaOvi.
So maybe that's what it is.
In as much as they all retain the final resh. But the very fact that as soon as a conjectural emendation is suggested, there appear at once three equally good terms to which the extant reading can be changed, shows how hazardous and how arbitrary such emendations are. You have to be careful about making emendations. In a minute, we're going to ask who's making the emendation. Yeah. Because if the yud isn't there, and if in many manuscripts you can't tell the difference between a bet and a kaf, right? There are many manuscripts where you can't, I indicated in the back, where some of them are clearly bet, some of them are clearly kaf, and some of them you really can't tell the difference whether the scribe was writing a bet or a kaf.
Are there all of these Sodis?
What?
Are there so the Ikers, are there all they exist?
Yeah, so that of course Yesod HaAchor. The heaviest. But
guess we might as well guess on ourselves.
Right, we'll get to it in a minute. But I have shown, writes Wolfson. Wolfson writes with great confidence. But I have shown, and I believe quite convincingly, that the entire passage, with its use of the term kavod, reflects Kabbalistic discussion.
The term kavod that we said.
Yeah, well, he says that I've shown very clearly that this is all about the sfirot, and naturally leads one to expect that the Yesod HaIbbur must likewise contain an allusion to Kabbalistic terminology. To change it to any other term would destroy that illusion. What do you want to do, he says to Gutmann? You want to destroy the allusion to the Kabbalah? Right? And would strip the term of its special significance, which we feel it must have according to this particular Kabbalistic context. So he's saying to Gutmann, you're ruining the Kabbalistic context. And in a private communication, Dr. G. Sholem, who at this time was a very young man in Jerusalem, of the Hebrew University, suggests that Crescas' explanation of Melo Kol Ha'aretz Kavodo by Yesod Ibbur reflects the biblical expression Betin Male'ah, the body of the pregnant, from Kohelet. This is an excellent suggestion, but its contention that this dispenses with the assumption that the term Yesod Ibbur contains an allusion to the Sfirot does not follow. On the contrary, it may be taken as a corroboration of that assumption. So Wolfson now has presented a very fascinating interpretation. Right? His interpretation is, just as the three dimensions permeate the whole universe, wherever you are, there are three dimensions. As three dimensions go through the table, three dimensions go through this can of seltzer. Three dimensions go through all of Brooklyn and Manhattan and the universe. Just so the Kavod Hashem goes through everything, and this is the Yesod HaIbur of impregnation. Now, I must say, when I was a young doctoral student, I was a student of Professor Arthur Hyman, who was later dean at Yeshiva University, but at that time he was at Columbia when I was at Columbia. And he was a student of Wolfson's. So I learned from Professor Hyman that Wolfson is basically always right. And not only that, but there was a very important interpreter of the Rambam named Leo Strauss, who was, after he finished his doctorate, he went to study with Gutman, and Gutman wrote a book. In Strauss's first book about the Rambam was against Gutman. It was a review, basically. It was a critique of Gutman. He was attacked Gutman. He wrote this while he was sitting in Gutman's class in Berlin. By the way, he was sitting in the class next to the same class that Nechama Leibovich, the Bible scholar, they sat together in that class, and Nechama Leibovich told me that she was completely shocked when this young fellow, Strauss, got up and criticized the professor. That they do it in America, they do it in Israel, but no one ever did this in Germany, where you would criticize a professor. In any case,
Leo Strauss, Buber's son-in-law?
No.
What's Strauss in America?
Leo Strauss, right?
What does it mean he criticized the professor? He asked a question, or he like literally?
He said your understanding of the Rambam is completely wrong. That's basically what. But in any case, there was the theory the idea that I had about Gutman on the basis of these of Strauss is that Gutman was a very great scholar, but he wasn't the kind of scholar who thinks outside the box. He wasn't the kind of scholar who could understand, like Wolfson, that in a philosophy book you could already, or in the middle of a philosophy book, you could have a paragraph about Kabbalah. So I just figured when I read this, okay, Gutman simply is unable to believe that in a philosophy book you can have a discussion of Kabbalah.
What did we know about Crescas and other places about this? Is the Achsut Kabbalah?
Yes, little references to Kabbalah. Okay. We know there are some references to Kabbalah. Also, you have, in general, of course.
Critic here in German, he says that there's no other mention of Kabbalah.
Oh. Yeah, right. That's what he says. No, okay, right. As we know that German is a kind of deteriorated Yiddish, right? So right. As
maybe this is a place philosophy and Kabbalah meet.
I saw.
Well, it happens every once in a while that you can have a philosophy book, and the philosopher will put in a page of Kabbalah or something. It happens. So it could happen here. But also in general, the rabbis from Catalunya, the rabbis in the school of the Ramban, namely the Rashba and the Ran, not so much the Ran, but also you have the Ritva a little bit. You have they all what characterizes them is they're not really 100% philosophers, and they're not 100% Kabbalah. They're open to both.
You see, they're Rivash, like brings from both, a little bit, not this and that.
Right, and the Rivash has something, right, he has one tshuva against philosophy, another tshuva against Kabbalah. Yeah. In the tshuva against Kabbalah, he says two very good, very interesting things. Mm-hmm. someone asked him, which midah of the Kadosh, which sfira should I daven to? And he says, I'm a tamim. He says, I daven straight, and I let the Kadosh Baruch Hu decide what midah he's going to use. And then he quotes someone. He doesn't say it in his own name, but he quotes about the asur or the isur, about the eser. He says the Christians have a shilush, and we in the Kabbalah has a eser. Okay, so. But you have
the criticism for these two schools of thought. It cannot be in said in one sentence even.
Right, of course not. Right, but these the rabbis.
Why isn't Atzilut?
I think also you see it also in the Rambam.
Why isn't Atzilut a type of form of shilush?
Why shilush?
Like something.
Trinity.
Okay, that's something else, but it's something else. Anyway, so we have this. We have Wolfson. I think Wolfson's, from the point of view of Kabbalah, maybe I didn't express it so well, but I think Wolfson has really presented a very strong and beautiful Kabbalistic idea. The idea that the Kavod Hashem is like the three dimensions that permeate everything. I think it's. Anyway, let's see what happens to this. In a moment we'll find out where the truth is, but okay, so then I have a couple of other people mentioned here. We have number 7, Simcha Buna Morbach wrote a very important book he was a professor at Bar Ilan University. Right, he was a Rav. Amudei Machshava Yisraelit.
It's a good book.
A very good book, right?
What does he write?
And he mentions that it's not clear what it's all about, but Wolfson has it right. Lushono shel Crescas Yesod Ibbur shel Yesodot Kvodo Af hi bilti brura dai tzokah. It's not really clear. We don't really understand. He says he's saying he doesn't really understand what this is. Rimazim v'asociaziot lashoniyot misifrut Kabbalah. He says it's references to the Kabbalah. Hamunach Ibbur b'Kabbalah goes on. But basically, he agrees with. Then and I have a number 8. My colleague who passed away last year, Shalom Rosenberg, Alav Shalom. Writes similar things. Mishpatim Ela Nisharu Stumim Lamrot Kol Niseonot Hasbeh. But he also, in the end, says that Wolfson has interpreted it right.
A word on Shalom Rosenberg.
What?
A word on Shalom Rosenberg.
Word on Shalom Rosenberg.
A word on Shalom Rosenberg.
Divrei Hesped.
Divrei
Hesped on him.
Well, he was a great philosopher and colleague, and you can see here he has he wrote very important things on Jewish philosophy.
Could we say he was often the last real philosophers in our times? Could we say such a statement?
You could say it about other people.
This book is the great
Well, I'm saying it's very few real.
Right, he was a real
Our
philosopher.
clips of him arguing with Shia Lebovitz. You've seen those?
Okay.
This is the major Marmot of it, the Ein Soifis, about the Mesuga Ein Soifis.
That what? Yeah. Mishpatim Ela Nisharu Stumim Lamrot Kol Nisionot HaHesber Sfarato HaEkronit Shel Wolfson Hi Sha'anu Omdim Bifnei Keta Ba'al Mashma'ut Kabbalit. Now notice Shalom Rosenberg writes something very interesting here. Julius Gutman Garas Acheret V'hitzia L'takein et HaText Hamachria Yesod HaIbur V'likro Yesod HaAchor. Okay, Asher, what's strange about what Shalom Rosenberg writes?
He accepted Wolfson's argument.
He accepted the emendation of Wolfson, not Gutman. I mean, Gutman had the right idea, but Gutman went with Yesod HaOvi. When Wolfson was making fun of Gutman, he said you could have been better. He came up with a better idea, but and Shalom Rosenberg attributes the better idea to Gutman, but Gutman maybe in a sense deserves
Well, it's
it.
not a mistake, right? He didn't write it on purpose this way. Rosenberg.
Rosenberg probably didn't. I don't know what he was thinking, but he's absolutely right that the best. That if you're going to read something, Yesod HaAchor is the best reading.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's not like he's trying to. He
No.
wrote it.
Change the facts.
He forgot who suggested.
Right. He
Yeah.
probably didn't think.
Man, this is the under view. You can pick the best.
Okay, so then he goes on. Right. So Shalom Rosenberg certainly was a great scholar. Particularly, he wrote a lot on the notion of Ein Sof. So on this notion, he's really a specialist. He wrote a very important work on the infinity in Jewish philosophy and in logic. Okay, now we move on to me, but this is something that I wrote in Tafshin Mem Gimel. Rosenberg wrote that in Tafshin Lamed. I wrote this in Tafshin Mem Gimel. This is what I was thinking in Tafshin Mem Gimel. המשמעות הכללית, את חטאי אני מזכיר היום, המשמעות הכללית של הקטע.
You know, the Chazanish used to learn Chazanish.
Yeah.
The Chazanish used to learn and say for Chazanish.
Right.
Thank you.
המשמעות הכללית של הקטע אומנם נהירה, על אף היות האל טרנסצנדנטי, Kadosh, who immanenti b'chvodo. So even though Hashem is Kadosh, with the kavod he's immanenti. This is what the keta is about. Ach ma'u hakavod, Wilson to'en Rav Hasdai Crescas mizaheh kan et hakavod im hasfirot. Tzeruf hamilim merkazi, aval satum b'keta denan hu yesod ha'ibur sheb'yesodot kvodo. Borur shelo Rav Hasdai Crescas היה הראשון להבין את סוד העיבור כסוד ההצלה האלוקית בעולמות הנבראים. מקור ברור לדברי רב חסדאי קרסקס הוא רב תודרוס הלוי אבולעפיה. I found this Kabbalistic source, Todros Halevi
Here you
Abulafia.
use Sod Ibbur.
I'm saying Sod Ibbur. I switch right from Yesod Ibbur to Sod Ibbur. HaKotev b'sifro Otzar HaKavod. Right? Ki parashat, this is what Todros Halevi Abulafia writes, Ki parashat ha'ibur v'sod ha'ibur hu amok amok mi yimtze'enu ki mi parashat ha'ibur yitparshu kol hadrachim b'chol hadvarim ha'mitragshim v'mitchadshim ba'olam ha'elyon ha'olam ha'emtze'i v'olam ha'shafel Hein latov, hein lamutav. So this is a really big secret, this Sod HaIbur. But divrei Rav Todros, kamo b'divrei Rav Hasdai Crescas, Sod HaIbur kashur im shloshet ha'olamot. Then I say, b'drasha shel darshan alum shem, this is some manuscript, שכנראה היה מעורב בחוגים הקרובים לרב חסדאי קרסקס, אנו מוצאים את הפירוש הבא לישעיהו ו' ג' המקביל, that's קדוש 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 Hashem's
Which
book.
sefer is this? Which sefer?
This is a sefer that's I saw in manuscript. It doesn't have a name. I don't know. Maybe it does have a name. I don't know. But it's a sefer we don't know who wrote it.
It came out already?
No, just in some 14th century manuscript from the Kufa of Hasdai Crescas. Hamakbil ba'alil leperush shel Rav Hasdai Crescas. It's written there. Hatam sha'anu omrim b'kedusha. Why do we say kadosh, kadosh, kadosh in the kedusha? Perush heyoto muvdal b'metziuto min ha'elyonim, min ha'emtzeim, u'min ha'tachtonim. That's kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. That Kadosh Baruch Hu is muvdal, nivdal, min ha'elyonim, min ha'emtzeim, and min ha'tachtonim. Va'amar malo kol ha'aretz kvodo, hora, she'im heyoto nivdal b'metziuto, b'chol bruav, b'tachlit ha'hevdel, af al pi chen, hashgachato v'hanhagato, nimtzeit b'chol ha'metzuim ha'shvelim, Kol shaken b'meshe l'mala mehem.
This could work with Tottenham too. I don't know why you see this. I mean, you're assuming a few things. You're assuming he's in the chod of Reb Hasdai Crescas. I don't know why you're assuming so. I think he's from Yemen. And second of all, this goes with Gutman too. That he's in the lowest, even though he's transcendent, he's also present in the lowest and most coarse and gross elements.
Right. But what I want to explain to Rav Moti is until the addition of Rav Shlomo Fisher, which comes out now in Tafshin Nun, as far as I could see, everybody was overwhelmed by Wolfson's interpretation. I admit it, because Wolfson, with all due respects to Gutman, that everybody respected Gutman and everything, but Gutman also, he did have this image of someone who doesn't think out of the box. He's straight, a yeket. And Wolfson was considered the great. So until the addition of Shlomo Fisher, basically I don't know of anybody who agreed with Gutman. Maybe it may possible. I can't say that no one agreed with him, but the consensus clearly was that Wolfson's interpretation was correct, and I tried to emphasize that I think it's really a beautiful interpretation that Wolfson has. It's a great interpretation of his own. Okay, what happens in the edition of Rav Shlomo Fisher? Rav Shlomo Fisher was a great Talmid Chacham.
The brother of Rav Sriyanka Fisher. He was a Shimei.
Right. Yeah, he great Talmid Chacham, Dayan in Yerushalayim. So he put out an edition of Sefer Or Hashem, and he reads as follows: V'haya hadimayon hazeh nifla, ki kasher rachakei hapandui nichnasim barachakei hageshem u'maloo, ken kvodo yitbarach b'chol chelkei ha'olam u'maloo, ka'omro, kadosh 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 Hashem tzvaot malo kol haaretz kvodo yirtzeh ki im heyoto kadosh v'nivdal b'shalosh kedushot שירמז בהם אל היותו נבדל משלושה עולמות, הנה מלוא כל הארץ, שהוא יסוד האחור שביסודות כבודו. מלוא כל הארץ כבודו, והארץ יתפצל שהוא יסוד האחור שביסודות. Well, when I saw this, I said, wait a minute. If Shlomo Fisher thinks that this is the right reading, maybe it's the right reading. Right? That's not Gutman already. This is already something to think about. But then there appeared what?
Does he mean that Aretz is the
Aretz, he means the element of Aretz. Right. The element Aretz.
There's the comment after Yisodot.
Right, exactly, because he's Malo Kol Haaretz, and maybe he even wrote it in later. Shahu HaYesod. Okay, now we have an interesting interview with Professor Rav Shlomo Zalman Havlin in Shlita in the Journal of Kulmus, of the Journal of Haredi it's part of Hamishpacha magazine. Right, part of Hamishpacha magazine. Right. And he's interviewed, and he writes this, and he says in his interview as follows: Achad mitalmidei hachachamim hagedolim shebedor, Shlomo Fisher, hotzi michadash et Sefer Or Hashem l'Rabbeinu Ḥasdai Crescas. And what's the point? He's trying to explain why it's important to check manuscripts. Right? It's important if you're going to put out a text. It's important to check all the manuscripts and to write down the different readings and the different texts. I once heard a talk by Harav Ratzon Arusi, who's a Talmid Muvhak of, he's an important Rav in Yerushalayim, was a Talmid Muvhak of Rav Yosef Kappa. And someone asked him, someone asked, and he said he once asked Rabbi Kapach why, of course Rav Kapach made many editions. He did editions of books by Rav Sadia Gaon, by the Rambam, or Bachia, Rabbeinu Bachia, Yehuda Levi, many editions, probably about at least 30 or 40.
You had a shaykh?
No, but so his Talmud, Rav Ratzon Arusi, asked him, why is it that you don't give an apparatus? He gives a little apparatus. Rav Kapach gives other readings only when he thinks that there's a doubt. If he doesn't think there's a problem, he doesn't give other readings. So he answered him and he said, you know how many texts I've put out? And Rav Ratzon Arusi said, well, that's 30, 35, 40 texts. He says, now, if I were to do an apparatus, you know how many texts I would have done? He says, none. Okay, so, in any case, Shlomo Zalman Havlin Shalita is making the point here that it's very important that you cite the different texts and the versions. So he says, B'ma Durazo of Rav Fisher, Tuknu al Yado Dvarim Rabim. So he has a lot of corrections that he has in his edition. La'achar iyun amok b'dfus harishon u'b'kitvei hayad. L'tza'arenu lo tzeref b'mahamadir mavo. He didn't write an introduction. He didn't write Heyorod. He didn't give maftechot to the sefer. He didn't do all these things. He didn't write notes. Va'af lo masar shum pratim al avodato va'al makorotov. He didn't tell us anything about his shita. He just gave us an addition. And now he gives an example which he gets very wrong. In fact, he got it so wrong, I don't even know how he did it, but Inyan haya b'she'ela ha'im Rabbeinu Ḥasdai Crescas asak gam b'Kabbalah. So there's a question, is there a Kabbalistic passage in Sefer Osher? Yesh shebikshu lehistayeya mimakom shebo katav al ha'adam shenotzar miyasod ha'ibur. I don't know.
The writer in Mishpacha probably.
Okay. We could say the book is that's right. It's an interview. It's an interview. Let's say it wasn't Rav Shlomo Zalman Havlin who made this thing. It was the interviewer who had scribbled something down and didn't understand. Right? Yesh bikshul v'halo musag ha'ibur hu musag shebakabbalah. Hamadir tikein et hamila la'achor. V'haynu shekavanat hadvarim she'adam notzat. Okay, forget about that. What's the point? V'halach lo kol lekesher lekabbalah. This is exactly what Wolfson said to Gutman. We said to Gutman, what are you trying to correct me for? You're ruining the whole Kabbalistic passage. Okay, now we move on. Then we have, after Fisher came out with his edition, there was a French translation, and the French translation translates like a Gutman and Rav Fisher. And then Moshe Idel is not convinced by Rav Fisher. Moshe Idel, the greatest living scholar of Kabbalah, if it's not Yehuda Libes and academia, Moshe Idel, who I understand is trying to get to come here, and maybe if he comes, he can even. I'll put in a good word. If he comes, he can probably even speak in Yiddish, which is
Romanian.
Right. He was not far away from Satu Mara. He was born in Tagarot Yams. And Edel writes as follows. He's writing a discussion of the Kabbalah of Gerona Kabbalah. He writes as follows. Harei shenuchal. Oh, we better hurry up. Harei shenuchal l'sakem. We can sum everything up. Ki bein makubalei Gerona u'makorotehem b'Kabbalat Provence b'mesorot hakshurot Rabbi Yitzhak Sagi Nahor. It's the really early days of Kabbalah in Provence. Mashma'o shel sod ha'ibur Einenu kashur legilgul neshamot. The original idea, the old idea of Rabbi Yitzchak Sagi Nahor of Sod HaIbur, it's not Gilgul Neshamot, Ba'olam Hazeh, Ela Miramez al Ma'avar HaShefa min HaSfirot HaElyonot, El Ever HaSfira HaAcharona HaShchina. So Yesod HaIbur, the true Sod HaIbur, is not the moving of the neshama from one soul, from one human being to another human being, but it's the shefa coming down from above. El ever sfirot, from the higher sfirot to the lower sfirot. That's to the Shechina. The Shechina receives the Ibbur. Shehuvana ki yeshut hamit-aberet b'shel kach. The Shechina mit-aberet. Shechina mit-aberet, and that's Sod HaIbur. Im efshar leta'er et emdatam shel ha'makubalim ha'ele בהקשר של סוד העיבור, דומני כי הדעת הקובעת היא שסוד זה מתאר תנועה אנכית של שפע. The shefa is going vertically from top to bottom, from above to below. לא המעבר האופקי, it's not horizontal, it's vertical. It's the shefa coming down from the higher sphero to the Shechina. It's not the Gilgul Neshamot, which is Ofki, Shel HaNeshama Miguf Leguf. HaIbur hu Barosh u'Barishona Sod HaShechina Velo Sod HaNeshama o HaGuf. Yetachen ki zika zo bein Ibbur u'Shechina Asuya hayta lehivatzer mitoch ma'amarim midrashiyim talmudiyim shebehem הקדוש, שבהם קידוש החודש יש גוון מיסטי כלשהו. ואילו הלבנה מתוארת כמתמלאת במונחים המזכירים את העיבור. עטרת תפארת לעמוסי בטן. יש לציין כי המשמעות התיאוסופית הקוסמית של העיבור כתהליך שחל על עולמות הלא אנושיים, the shefa from above to below, השפיע על רב חסדאי קרסקס, כפי שהזכיר זאת זאב הרבי, quotes my thing. Okay.
I think it's a very weak...
כפי שהוכיח, כפי שהוכיח, לא רק הזכיר, הוכיח. Now, the fact is, with all this, when you check the manuscripts, Mother, you want to say something?
Yeah, what do you think today, as I'm standing...
What do I think today? There's no question that Gutman was right. The emendation of Shalom, reading it of Shalom was Gutman. And
Gutman's right in the book. So the
right reading is Yesod HaAchor. First of all, according to the text, you can see the text at the end. I bring all the texts at the bottom. I should have checked this when I was writing my doctorate, but you know, you can see how they're what all the different readings are. The best manuscript to say for Or Hashem is Firenze. It's the Firenze manuscript, which is letter Hey. Hinei Melo Kol Haaretz Shehu Yesod, and there's a mistake there. Yesod HaAtar, and it's corrected to Yesod HaAchor. Should be Yesodot Kvodot. Hey, right.
It's connected on the
Right. In any case, the readings, when you check all the best manuscripts as follows. First, none of them have Yud in, the first time the Yud comes in is with the printing in Ferrara. The Yud, none of them have the Yud. And some of them have clearly Kaf, and some of them have clearly Bet.
You said you need a Yud for Ibbur. Maybe you could write it out of Yud.
You don't, but if you had the Yud, no, you don't, but if you had the Yud, it would make it difficult. Ikur is a very unusual term. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there are lots of terms. For example, there's one, look at number 14, number 14 comes from a very important sefer called Ruach Chaim. Ruach Chaim, we don't know who wrote Ruach Chaim. No, it's not Leviat Chaim. No, it's Ruach Chaim. Ruach Chaim was a book that was written right after the appearance of Moreh Nevuchim in Hebrew. It's sometimes attributed to the Ibn Tibbon family, but it's somebody in that circle, somebody in the circle of in Provence when Moreh Nevuchim was translated. We don't know who wrote it, but it was a very, very popular book, and the author writes that he writes the book in order to help people read Moreh Nevuchim. Because especially people, right, Jews, not only Jews, nobody in France at that time, very few people had a background in philosophy. The Christians didn't study philosophy, and the Jews who were in Provence didn't. Both the Jews and the Muslims in the Arab world were studying philosophy at the time. But so this book Ruach Chaim comes to give you a quick course in philosophy so that you can understand what's going on in Moreh Nevuchim. The book was very, very popular, and he writes in the middle of the book, he writes, V'chol elu ha'arba'a yisodot. He's explaining to the reader exactly what the four elements were, like he's answering the question which I was asked right at the beginning of our session today. All of these four elements, ha'esh hu hazach v'hadak shevakulam. Fire is the finest and most delicate of the elements. V'ha'afar hu ha'av v'ha'achor shevakulam. So there we have all the words which we've seen here. Afar, which Wilson suggested is one of them. Av, which is ovi, and achor, which is fat. And it turns out that it's used a lot, this word achor is used a lot to describe the element of it. Now, what do we see in the manuscripts? We see in the manuscripts that the scribes get confused. It often happens that scribes get confused with an unusual word that they don't really know what's going on. Another thing that scribes do is they don't always distinguish between bet and kaf, and but none of them have vav. So some of them have it wrong, but some of them clearly are writing bet. Most of them are clearly writing kaf. A lot of them are writing letters which you can't tell even when you magnify it and you look very carefully, you can't tell whether it's a bet or a kaf. And analyzing it, taking in consideration which are the better manuscripts and which manuscripts influence other manuscripts, there is no question that the manuscripts say that the right reading is basically what Shalom Rosenberg said, Yesod Achor, which was suggested by Wilson more or less as a joke to push aside Gutman. But one point I want to make before I forget it is Wilson attacks. It's a very nice attack, against Gutman. He says, don't make emendations all the time. Whenever you have, once you want to amend the text, once you make an emendation, someone else can come up with another emendation, and that's why we don't allow anybody to amend the Torah, to amend the Tanakh. Because once someone makes one emendation, someone's another emendation, there's no end. So Wolfson says, what are you making an emendation for? We have a text. Now the question is, who's making the emendation? The joke is that it's Wolfson who's making the emendation, because the text doesn't really have the vav. He's putting in the vav, reading Ibbur. He's changing the kaf to a bet. He's changing the kaf to a bet.
The yod, it's missing the yod.
Right, it doesn't have the yod. Right, he's adding the yod, and he's changing the kaf to a bet. So who's amending the text? So sometimes it's not clear which reading is amending the text and which reading is sticking to the text.
Can we, before we wrap it up, go back to the idea that Crescas is supposed to be the greatest critic of the Rambam? How do we reconcile everything he just said with being a critic of the Rambam? It's not criticism. He's talking a different language. It's not philosophical. He's throwing out like words, ideas that it's not. And the Rambam says, okay, we don't have Lo Yesiga Messiah Gif. So he comes up with Messiah Gif, but he's just using words.
Messiah Gif. I don't know why.
It's Messiah Gif. It's oxygen, it's air, it's earth, it's Gashmias, it's Messiah Gif. That has Messiah Gif.
The Rambam talks about about the Shefa coming down and it's overflowing.
But not in that way that's Koshberg is like a
See, the Rambam when he uses the word makom, when he says, translate quotes Hashem as Makom. Makom for the Aristotelians means the enveloping area. For example, the Makom of this, right? The envelope is the Makom. So the Makom of the world is the highest enveloping sphere is the Makom. So Rambam says, what does it mean to say Kadosh Baruch Hu's Makom Shalom? It means the highest madrega. The highest madrega. Okay. So what's Hasdai Crescas? What's the difference? First, I want to say that the question is very, very complex to answer in 2 minutes, but I want to say that what we saw last time, for example, with regard to the Rambam, you can ask, what's the difference between how the Rambam interprets the Bira Doleket and the way Rav Hasdai Crescas? Now, the fact is, if we look carefully at the Rambam, we see that he has 2 steps, which we see it very clearly, both in Avraham Avinu, right? Avraham Avinu, first we have Kevan Shenigmal Eitan Zeh, which is Ekev, that he comes to know Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hirat Boro Ekev Shanim, Ekev, and so when he was 172, and when he died at 175, 172 years, Ekev years, he knew Kadosh Baruch Hu, and 3 years he came to know. Rambam is saying that first proof, Hagalgal Sovev Tamid, Avraham Avinu came to him when he was 3 years old. Basically saying that that's not the really strong proof. Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim brings a lot of criticism of this proof. And he says we can show that the proof is not valid. It's a good proof that puts you in the right direction, but it's not. Then he goes on to say, Arba'im ben Arba'im Shana Avraham Ikirat Boro. So, and between the first proof of Galgal Sovev Tamid until Hitzitz Alav Bal Habira, it's 37 years go by. Avraham is 40 years old. So really, Rambam is interpreting that midrash the same way as we saw Hasdai Crescas, even though it doesn't really look at immediately when you look at the Rambam, but when you think what the Rambam is really doing, he's saying Avraham Avinu began his journey towards knowing Hashem. Journey is exactly the right word, because he says, I am mishotet bedato v'halach mimakom lamakom. He begins his journey with that first proof, but the first proof, a Galgal Sovev Tamid, just gives him an inclination. It was only when Avraham Avinu got to be 40 that he comes to the proof.
For a 3-year-old. Galgal Sovev Tamid is good for a 3-year-old.
Good for a 3-year-old. The Aristotelian proof is good for a 3-year-old. But so when you come finally to the true proof, which is connected with Yud Kei Vav Kei at the beginning of Hilchot Yesodei Torah, that's
but it doesn't say how is it sits. It could also through the session.
It doesn't.
It's not it's like
right, but I'm trying to answer you, Rav Yoel's question here. That what you see also in the Rambam is also saying that Galgal Sovev Tamid just gives you a netiyah. Now and then he has says that's Hasdai Crescas is saying the same thing. He has this original. You have this original proof. The proof just gives you a netiyah. And we can ask, well, what is the final proof? What does it mean that Kadosh Baruch Hu is Meitzitzel of Baal Habira?
Doesn't say that Crescas.
Crescas says it's nevuah. It's nevuah, which you get it. I mean, you can get it either direct nevuah if you're a navi, or you get it from the Torah. In the Rambam is saying that it's something that you have to get by studying the universe, studying the entire universe.
It's totally different.
Okay, so it's totally different. Where you're saying what Hasdai Crescas is trying to minimize is the importance of all importance of philosophy. He's not saying philosophy is not important. He's saying it's not all important. It has
something beyond that.
Right, there's something beyond it that's not, which is what we'll talk about in the 6th session about the ahava, that ahava. But the the emphasis on the importance, which Rav Ḥasdai Crescas doesn't like in the Rambam, is the great emphasis that the Rambam has on the importance of science. Science has its place, but it's not Maaseh Merkava and Maaseh Bereshit.
He brought more science into the discussion because he's talking about like the oxygen, the ufa, I don't know.
Okay, the ether. So that's true. When you try to free religion from science, if you succeed, you've also freed science from religion. Right. Both are the same thing. I mentioned the Ran. I think I mentioned last time what he says about Maaseh Bereshit. When they say to him, "You just gave an interpretation of Maaseh Bereshit. Who gives you the rashut to interpret Maaseh Bereshit?" And he says, "Wait a minute. I don't agree with the Rambam that the physical and the physics is Maaseh Bereshit. The only way you can know Maaseh Bereshit is if you have nevuah, or if you get secret Kabbalah. I haven't gotten any of that. Therefore, he says,
impossible.
it's impossible for me to reveal the secret because I don't know the secret. Therefore, I can say whatever I want to. And any drash that I give on Maaseh Bereshit, Maaseh Merkava, it's just like some Rav getting up at a wedding and giving.
Then comes the standard. Then we study this type of mistake. Then comes the standard. Then we study this type of mistake.
Right.
There is Rabbi already admitted that he has no clue what he means when he says. Think about it.
I think that there's a big lesson there that just like in Bira Doleket, you can interpret it two ways. Either it wasn't Bira Doleket, it's going on fire. So sometimes you look at a word and you're not sure whether it's Ibbur or Havur, and you have to. But here, So you really. So let me just conclude with one thing. I don't know who also agrees with me. I thought the interpretation of Wilson was really a wonderful interpretation for Kabbalah. And then Moshe Idel agrees that it really sums up the direction of the Gerona Kabbalah. And you can see that Wilson also got it from the Gerona Kabbalah because he quotes, when he tries to bring sources, he cites Rav Ezriel and Rav Ezra, who he's citing in the notes. So he's also using the Gerona Kabbalah. I think Wolfson really has his interpretation is a beautiful interpretation of Soda Ibbur. Problem is that he is based on a text. So what are we going to do? Are we going to take his interpretation and throw it away? No, it still stands. But instead of attributing it to Rav Hasdai Crescas, we have to attribute it to Rav Tzvi Wolfson. What he failed as a scholar, as an academic scholar, as a portion of Hasdai Crescas, he succeeded as an original Kabbalist.
But it's a beautiful portion. We see anywhere that someone said this is a new explanation of Soda Ibbur. We know Soda Ibbur normally means Gilgulim. It's a new concept.
Right.
There's no proof for any other Kabbalist.
No, but Edel does have.
Edel has some.
He has a couple of them.
Okay, beautiful.
Edel has. What have I said about Edel? He has some good sources, but his best source to prove the Biblia is Hasdai Crescas.
Beautiful.
With the